Ndị be anyị ekene m unu. Asị m nke onye chiri ya zere. Ihe a bụ Ada Igbo ka ị na-anụ olu ya na Igbo Media n'ụbọchị nke taa. N'Igbo Media anyị na-ewetara unu ọtụtụ ozi gbasara Biafra land maka ihe na-eme n'ala Igbo na mba ndị ọzọ. Ozi nke ụbọchị nke taa si n'aka Deputy Prime Minister Ngozi ORABUEZE. Otu o si ewetara anyị ọtụtụ ozi gbasara Prime Minister Simon Ekpa na ọtụtụ ihe ndị ọzọ ha na-emegasị na Finland iji wee mee ka this our Biafran struggle ka ọ bụrụ ihe nwere isi. Biko ọ bụrụ na ụbọchị tata bụ izi na-esonyere anyị n'iru akwụkwọ, biko echefuna itinyere anyị aka n'iru akwụkwọ, gwakwa anyị ihe iche na comment section and gbasakwa ozi a ka o zuo ụmụnna anyị n'ebe dị iche iche arụ. Ngwa gere ya ka ọ ha n'uju.
Short, whose dreams we are buried beneath the soil of the land that has endured far too much sorrow. These were not ordinary lives. They were lives offered, knowingly or unknowingly, on the altar of justice. Farmers, teachers, students, nurses, artists, leaders of faith, and soldiers. They were children who never grew old. They were voices silenced by bombs, by guns, by starvation, by oppression, and by the heavy hands of indifference. All of them, every soul paid the price for a freedom they were denied in life, but whose legacy they have now carved into the pages of our history. We are talking 8 million Biafrans since the arrival of the foreign invaders from Britain into our motherland in the 19th century to date. And so as we gather in reflection, we do so with new meaning because something has shifted. On November 29, 2024, the world heard a voice long suppressed. On that day, we proclaimed what has lived in our heart for generations: the restoration of the sovereign and independent state of Biafra. Over 50 million Biafrans in the homeland and diaspora voted for these in a self-referendum, whereas over 1,500 Biafrans gathered to proclaim this in Latin Finland in November 2024. This was not merely a political gesture. It was a moral reckoning. It was the acknowledgement of wounds long denied and the beginning of healing that has waited for almost 60 years to begin. This declaration is not a call to war. It is a call to dignity, a declaration of identity, a reclaiming of truth, our raw truth. Yet, even in this moment of hope, we must not forget what brought us here. We remember the Confederation War of 1901 killing thousands of Biafrans. We remember the massacre of over 50 Biafra women during a peaceful demonstration in 1929 against the introduction and imposition of new taxes by the warrant chiefs. We remember the unprovoked and sudden savage attack of 1945 in northern Nigeria, which left bodies of Biafran women, men, and children littered all over the streets, and their property worth thousands of pounds reduced to shame. We remember the 1966 unjustly and unprovoked genocidal act of extinction, where over 700,000, more than 700,000 innocent Biafrans were massacred all over Nigeria on order by the then government. It wasn't until recently, in February 2025, that one of the main actors General Ibrahim Babangida, who later became the head of state of Nigeria, came out in a book to confess that their orders and actions against Biafrans then were simply out of hatred. Their actions against Biafran then were simply out of hatred, evil intention, and impunity. He received recognition upon millions to promote his library. A lie, an atrocity they collectively perpetuated for almost 60 years. We remember the horrific attack of 1967 when our late leader, Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu declared the Republic of Biafra following Nigeria's head of state, Yakubu Gowon's sudden withdrawal from the accord they both entered in Aburi, Ghana, shortly after returning to his office in Nigeria. With intent and impunity, Nigeria and the world superpowers led by Britain aggressively descended on Biafra in the worst genocide war of our time in 1967 to 1970, during which over 5 million Biafrans got their lives shortened. Biafrans were torn apart as a result, and some were brainwashed to deny their identity in order to be spared or survive. We remember a lot of war crimes committed against the Biafra civilians during the Biafra War, blocking of humanitarian aid supply to the Republic of Biafra to starve the women and children to death. We remember the RRR, Reconciliation, Rehabilitation, Reconstruction, the measure which Nigeria vowed to implement after the war. Though our people were hopeful but not surprised that it was never implemented accordingly. On the contrary, the criminal enterprise boldly passed and implemented an inhumane economic policy to strip the people of Biafra of all what they own, both tangible assets and bank deposits. We remember that criminal and terrorist states gave only £20 to each Biafran in place of their huge wealth all over the failed state. Many Biafrans died as a result of the trauma. We remember the chilling campaign of extrajudicial executions and violent crackdown and deadly repression of pro-Biafran activists by the ZOO government using its security forces in August 2015 to August 2016, killing over 150 peaceful Biafrans. We remember that these barbaric acts of genocide on our people have never ceased. More than 1,500,000 innocent unarmed Biafrans have ceased after that Biafran war had their lives suddenly and brutally ended by the Nigeria criminal terrorist state. For the same reasons, even while in their places of worship, in their homes, farms, marketplaces, and so on, the perpetrators have since our board leaders' absence become bolder and determined. That was why they removed Onyedu Nnamdi Kanu and Prime Minister Simon Ekpa. We remember that many of us are displaced all over the world in diaspora and others internally displaced. Many thousands have lost their lives in the process of seeking refuge elsewhere. We cannot continue to run from the threat of extinction or remain in bondage in the failed criminal geographical entity, Nigeria. Forever, we cannot continue to be strangers all around the world or risk the same in our motherland. We remember the amalgamation as a marriage of two strange bedfellows insisted upon by our hater and our aggressor. Our both leaders, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu and Simon Ekpa, are being violated and have their freedom unlawfully infringed. Their absence has resulted in increased acts of intimidation and perpetration of genocidal attack on thousands of Biafrans. What great news that Biafrans have put an end to it. Now, we can start the healing process. We remember that more than 28 Biafran youths, Onyendu's parents and his family, dog, were killed during the Buhari-directed Operation Python Dance on 14 September 2017. The Nigerian state, the Nigerian president, they declare and they kill Biafrans. Nobody accounts for those lives, not anymore. We remember that many indigenous people of Biafrans are abducted without any cause, who ended up dying in the hands of the terrorist Nigeria prisons and confinements, and those kidnapped for ransom and organ harvest, or they just disappeared by the zoo terrorists in Biafra land out of hatred and plan to extinct us. Thousands of innocent Biafrans are languishing as we speak in Nigeria DSS dungeon.
Ndị be anyị ngwadalụli nnekwu nsi wee na-esore na n'ilu akwụkwọ na Igbo Media beba si wee wetara onye bụ ozi. Gịnị ka ikwu gbasara maka ihe ndị a niile anyị wetara n'ụbọchị nke taa? Kapara ketụsa ya bụ ozi ka ọrụtụ ụmụnne anyị ndị ọzọ n'ebe dị iche iche ntị maka ọ sị ọ nụrụ si ma gịnị ya kara nwanne